My name is Dr. John Hall, and I'm here to talk to you about the impossible being possible. I'm the author of Am I Still Autistic? And by the end of my talk here, you'll know the answer. But to give you a hint, on the way up here on the 405, I listened to Barry Manilow. Not the entire greatest hits, one song for an hour and a half. I made it through the rain. And that song really symbolizes what I'm here to talk to you about today. When I was 18 months, I was diagnosed as severely autistic and slightly mentally retarded. And I was diagnosed by several doctors with those conditions. My parents were told that it would be impossible for me to live a normal life, that what would be possible is living in a group home and maybe being able to talk a few words, if I was lucky. Well, that was an impossible proposition for my mother. And my mother fought. She got me into every program there was, and she was my therapist as well. She was, I say this in the most affectionate way possible, she was like chemotherapy. She killed the cancer eventually, but she was intense about it. So, by the time it was time to go in the first grade, I'd improved a lot. I wasn't making eye contact, my speech wasn't exactly quite right, I didn't know numbers, letters, all that good stuff, but I'd improved a lot. So my mom wanted to put me in a regular mainstream first grade classroom. Now this was 1981 and that just wasn't done then. And when I look back at it, if she hadn't done that, if she hadn't fought for that, I would not be here talking to you today. It's that simple. But I had no business being there. No business. I walked into the classroom and I announced to all these kids, 30 kids, that I had just flown in on a plane to be in class here. And I'm still reminded of that today because all the people I've reconnected with on Facebook like to tease me about that. But something else happened that day, and it was profound. What happened was our teacher, Miss Savage, handed out our readers. And there was this big blue thick reader that a lot of the kids got, a smaller green reader, and this really puny red reader that myself and maybe a few other kids received. And I said, well, Miss Savage, why can't I have the thicker reader? And she said, you know, it's not possible. You can't read. You know, so you've got to start out with the red reader. And it was that day that I realized that I was different, that there was something different about me. There was something, quote unquote, inferior about me compared to the other kids. And I was going to turn that around. In my first grade thinking, I was going to turn that around. I got a lot of help, but by the time I was in third grade, I was reading at a 12th grade level and speaking normally and all that other good stuff. Wasn't making a lot of eye contact, but I was really on my way. And by the time elementary school was over, I was really doing well. And it was time for another change. And it was time to go to junior high school. And boy, the 7th grade was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. My mom was diagnosed with lupus that year, and I was bullied pretty much every day. I would come home with bruises. It was that bad. And I was embarrassed because I didn't want to be different. So eventually it got so bad that I decided to just not go to school a lot. So I would walk to school and find a place to hide and just stay there all day. And you know, that was as tranquil for me as what I would do when I was 2, 3 years old, you know, when I would put light switches on and off or play with pots and pans for 3 hours at a time. I nearly flunked out of 7th grade. If there's a way to flunk out of 7th grade, I did it. And over that summer, I went to sleepaway camp. I grew several inches, I thinned out, I felt a lot more confident about myself. And I went back to Lincoln Middle School, and I was excited because I was going to make it different. And I did. By the time I got out of Lincoln, I had straight A's, and I was happy to go to school. I liked going to school. It's still a little bullying, but it was so much better. So again, it was time for another change. And my parents wanted me to go to a college prep school, Windward School here in West LA. And I thought that was a good thing. You know, boy, I'm going to have a fresh start. I'm pretty normal now. Not fully normal, but I'm pretty normal. And I'm going to have a fresh start with new kids. Well, I didn't know what I was doing. And I walked into the school. There were about 50 people total in my freshman class. And I was just, I felt awkward. I was nervous. I was shy. I didn't know how to make friends. So all I would do is smile all the time. Now that's better than what I did in the first grade to get people's attention, biting, you know, all that good stuff. But I think the effect was about the same. And ninth grade was just a bad year. It was so bad that at the end of the year I said to my parents, Mom, Dad, I just want to get my GED and be an adult. And of course they weren't going to have anything of that. So I went back to school the next year, and again, I was determined to make it different. I was determined to take an impossible situation and turn it around. And so I started making friends, had to, go through all the initiations and everything, because when you smile that much, you got to pay for it, one time or the other. And by the end of the year, things were going pretty well. I was elected junior class vice president. I had friends. It was great. And then junior year was even better. For the first time in my life, I started feeling normal. I actually was feeling normal, accepted, liked. Things were good. I loved going to school, not so much for the academics, but definitely for the social environment. And I decided to do something really bold at the end of that year. I decided to run for student body secretary. And I was running against another kid, and he was really popular, so I was worried. But then a week before the election, he dropped out. So I'm like, wow, I can't lose. I've got this covered. No one's running against me. Well, I lost. I only got 40% of the vote. That's a pretty interesting situation, by the way. I recommend everyone go through that at least once in their lives. And my friends just said, look, forget about it. It's not important. It's not going to be cool if you run again and lose. Everyone's like, just drop it. Even my mom and my dad. My mom doesn't drop anything, but she wanted me to drop this. And I said, no way. And I went to the administration, and I said, look, I would love to talk to the school. I want to talk to everyone in the school. I want to run again. And they thought I was nuts. But they let me do it. And I got up in front of 500 kids, whatever it was, and humiliating to have to beg for people's votes. But the next time around, I won over 80% of the vote. And senior year was great, and I loved it. If I could still be in senior year, I would be. And I got into good schools and all that, and it was time to go to college. But I needed to support myself through college, and I needed to get a job. So I probably only needed to work 30 hours a week, but I decided that I was going to work 60 hours a week and go to school full time. And it was convenient because with having a girlfriend by that point, having school full time and working beyond full time, I didn't have to make any friends. I didn't have time. So I went through college. I don't know anyone from college. No one. Not one person. I remember a few people, but that's about it. So by the time I graduated from college, I was an executive. At 21 years old, I was a director of sales and marketing for a fairly prominent company. And I decided that I was going to go out on my own. And I started a company for my one-bedroom apartment in Woodland Hills. My mom said that was the craziest idea you could do. But one thing I learned from my relationship with my mom is not to listen to her all the time. And I started my company from my one-bedroom apartment. Today, 14, 15 years later, we have 150 employees, and we have offices across the country. We're a leading education management company. And business saved me in many ways, because even though I was functional and going to school and being able to socialize and so forth, business puts you in situations where you have to socialize, especially if it's your own business. You have to talk to people you don't want to talk to. You have to get in front of people. You have to make friends and develop relationships with people. And after a few years of that, boy, I was ready to go. Things were really, really going for me. I was dating the field. I dated too much, and I was really good at it. I got way too good at it. If you want to hear more, you should read my book. But eventually I settled down, and I got married, and we had 2 kids. And our son, at 18 months, I could just tell he was autistic. We got him diagnosed. Hearing that diagnosis was, besides the days my parents passed, was the most horrible, devastating thing that has ever happened to me. My life just went out the window. This child is named after me, and I wanted so much for him. And now he's autistic, and now he's not going to be able to do anything. And now he's going to have to go through everything I went through. And by this time, I was in total denial that I even went through this stuff. I knew what I went through, but it was something else. It wasn't autism. And for a few years, it was just in a really dark place. And then my mom passed away. And I really started thinking about my life. And I started accepting my autism. And I started accepting his autism. And I decided to write it all down. And it was so cathartic to do that. And when I wrote the book, at the end of the book, I'm like, oh, I'm not autistic. I'm definitely not autistic, no way. But this is a great story. And I decided to share it. I decided to get it published, which was absolutely crazy, because if you told me I was going to do that 3 years ago, I would want no one in my life today to know about this. Published the book, and since then I have met thousands of people across the country, many parents and families who are dealing with autism, including young adults who have dealt with autism or are still dealing with it. And the impossible is truly possible. There are so many great stories and examples of kids who weren't talking until they were 9, were banging on the wall until they were 10, who are doing constructive things today. These kids can learn. These kids can achieve. The possible is possible for them, but we have to advocate for them. We have to advocate just as I advocate for my son, just as my mother and father advocated for me. And I realized from this book, in writing this book, that my son can do anything. And I just need to support him, and he's doing great things. And you know what? I am autistic, and I'm okay with that. What I've been able to do is I've been able to modify myself, model after the world, and turn it into like typical behavior, and live in this world, and do it effectively. And I've really realized that the impossible is truly possible. And that's the way I live my life every day. But after writing this book, I realized that I was actually doing that. And I realized how powerful that is. And that's the message I'm trying to spread. 2 messages, actually. The first being that kids that have special needs, that are autistic, they can learn. They can function. We need to give them a chance. We need to understand them. And the impossible is possible. Thank you very much.